His blood was warm on my hands before I understood the wound would never close. I pressed the cloth to the old scar on the Alpha King's side, and the moment my fingers found it, it lit a thin blue light deep in the skin, like a coal that never went out. He didn't see it. He never did. Only I could. Around us, the whole court held its breath. Everyone in Frostmere knew the thing they would not say out loud. Their king could not father a son. And a kingdom with no heir is a kingdom already at war. For 2 years, I was the maid who touched what no one else would touch. I told myself I felt nothing. I told myself that every night, the way you say a prayer, you stopped believing. I was still telling myself it the morning I counted the days, and the days came up wrong. I came to Frostmere with 2 skills and no name worth saying. I could bind a wound so it didn't fester, and I could keep my mouth shut. In a court built on a frozen lake, where the ice groaned all night under the king's hold, those were the only 2 skills that kept a low woman warm. They called me Runa. They called me the Hands. Mostly, they didn't call me anything at all. That is its own kind of cold, by the way, not the wind. Being looked through. A serving girl learns to move along the walls of a room so no one has to notice her, and after a while she half believes she isn't there either. The night it started, the old healer shook me awake before dawn. "Get up, girl." Branna's whisper had teeth in it. "The king's wound is weeping again. The men can't stand the sight of it. You're not afraid of blood." "Everyone's afraid of his blood," I said, already reaching for my shawl. "You're afraid of less than most." She pushed a basin into my arms and a clean roll of linen on top of it. "Don't speak unless he speaks first. Don't look at his face longer than you have to. And whatever you do," her old hand caught my wrist, "don't tell him it will heal. He's sent away 3 who did." "Then what do I tell him?" "Nothing. You're the hands, not the mouth." She pushed me toward the door, then stopped, her hand tight on my shoulder, and for a breath the hardness went out of her old face. "That wound of his," she said, very low. "It's older and stranger than any blade ever made. Don't you go wondering at it out loud." "Some questions," asked in this hold. "Get a girl put out onto the ice." She let go. "Just clean it, and come straight back to me, no one else." I had seen Alpha King Heir twice before that night. Both times across a crowded hall. Both times the way you see a storm coming over the lake from far enough away to still feel small. Up close, in the cold of his chamber, he was worse. He sat by a low fire with his shirt open, and his jaw set like a man deciding whether to let me live. He was big the way the old stone was big, like he'd been there before the rest of us, and would be there after. A long scar cut down his side, 4 years old, from the night assassins came for him and his Luna both. The court said the wound took the strength out of him to make sons. The court said a great many things. "You're the maid," he said, not a question. "I'm the hands, your grace." I knelt and set the basin down without spilling it, which felt, just then, like the bravest thing I had ever done. "Look at me when you speak." I looked. That was a mistake. His eyes were the gray of the lake in the hour before snow, and there was nothing soft in them, and I felt the whole of myself go still under them like a hair in open ground. "They told you to fix it," he said. "They told me to clean it." Something moved across his face and was gone, fast, like a fish under ice. "Good. The last 3 promised to fix it. I had them sent home. I don't keep liars where I sleep." He leaned back. "Well, hands, get on with it." I unwound the old dressing. The wound underneath was an ugly thing 4 years, and it still wept at the edges, red and angry, like it had been made that morning. I had bound 100 wounds. None of them had ever looked back at me the way this one did. And none of them had been shaped quite like it. Under the ruin, where the skin had tried and failed to knit, there was almost a pattern, not the clean line a blade leaves, but something worked into it, deliberate, 3 faint seams and the curve of a broken ring. A trick of the scarring, I told myself, and looked away from it. I would remember those marks much later on a frozen lake, in an old woman's hand when I finally learned what they were. I dipped the cloth. I pressed it to the scar. And the wound woke up. A thin blue light came alive deep in the ruined skin, low and steady, like a heartbeat that had been waiting a long time for someone to find it. It ran up under my fingers and into the bones of my hand, and, for one breath, the whole cold room felt warm. I nearly dropped the basin. He didn't feel the light. He felt something else. He let out a long, slow breath, the kind a man lets out when he's set a heavy thing down at last, and his eyes came halfway closed. "That's new," he said quietly. "What is, your grace?" "It doesn't hurt." He said it the way you'd say a strange word in another language. Like he wasn't sure he had it right. 4 years. It always hurts. His gray eyes opened and found me, and for the first time there was something in them that wasn't stone. "What did you do?" Nothing. I only cleaned it." He watched me a moment longer than was comfortable. I felt it on my skin like a hand. "Come back tomorrow," he said. I came back tomorrow. And every tomorrow after. And I had no idea yet that the blue light under my fingers would either save my life or end it. After that first night, they sent for me when the moon was full. That was the first thing nobody could explain, though it took me months to let myself wonder at it. A clean scar doesn't keep time with anything. His did. When the moon rounded out white over the lake, the wound burned worst, and so, on those nights, the great Alpha King of Frostmere sent for a serving girl to come and lay her hands on him in the dark. He talked, those nights. Not at first. At first he sat in his silence like it was a coat he wore against me. But silence is a thing I'm good at. And if you can sit quiet long enough in a man's silence, you start to hear what's underneath it. "You don't ask questions," he said one night, watching me work. "Why?" "You don't like them, your grace." A short sound, not quite a laugh, but the first warmth I'd heard out of him. "No, I don't." He was quiet a moment. My Luna asked questions. Isolde, all day, every day, about everything. His voice changed on her name, went careful, like a man stepping on ice he didn't trust. I used to think it tired me. Now the quiet's worse. "You can talk, if you want," I said. "I'm only the hands. The hands don't repeat things." He looked at me for a long moment. Then, he started to talk. He told me about Isolde, how she'd died the same night he was wounded. How she'd been carrying their child, near its time and strong, the old midwife had sworn, and how she'd lost it that same night, in the blood and the panic, and never carried again before the fever took her in the spring. "The babe was healthy," he said, almost to himself. "Branna told me so. To this day I don't understand how a healthy child just stops. But they do, for me. They always have." He didn't know how close he'd come, in that one tired sentence, to the whole truth. Neither did I. He told me he'd stopped praying to the moon goddess the night they buried her. He told me a kingdom needs an heir the way a roof needs a beam, and his was rotted through, and the whole court was standing under it waiting for the day it came down. He told me he had given up on a son the way a man gives up on good weather. "They want me to marry again," he said. "Some alpha's daughter from the south. Strong bloodline. Wide hips." His mouth twisted. "Build the line." As if I haven't already buried the line. "Maybe it isn't buried," I said before I could stop myself. The words just walked out of me. He turned his head slowly and looked at me, and I braced for the cold. "Careful, hands," he said. But it came out rough, not hard. "Hope is the cruelest thing you can put in a man like me. Don't hand me what you can't carry back out the door." I should have said sorry and kept my eyes down. Instead I said, "I've carried worse than hope, your grace." That stopped him. Something opened in his face, surprise, then something warmer behind it, quick, before he shut it again. "How long have you been in my hold?" he asked. 2 years. 2 years. He shook his head. "And I'm only learning tonight that the hands have a tongue on them." I felt the heat come up my neck. "I'll keep it behind my teeth, your grace." "Don't," he said. "Just that. Don't." And he held my eyes one beat too long, and the fire snapped, and I went back to my work because I did not know what to do with the way my heart was suddenly loud. He told me this part himself, long after, in the dark, when I asked him what he'd thought of me those first weeks. I'll give it to you the way he gave it to me. Because you should hear it. I told myself you were furniture, he said. A useful pair of hands. I had to. Because the truth was I waited all month for the moon to turn, just so I'd have a reason to send for you, and a king who waits on a serving girl is a king with one more weakness, and I could not afford one more weakness. So I called you the hands in my own head, and I watched nothing else in the room but you, and I hated how much I wanted you to come back. That was Eirik. That is the whole of him, really. A man who'd been taught that wanting was a wound, hiding the wanting behind a cold word, and bleeding from it anyway. But that came later. That night I knew none of it. That night, I only knew the cold. Because here's the second thing nobody could explain. The corridors of Frostmere were so cold the guards' lips went blue, and the water froze in the basins between rooms. And the cold never touched me. Not once. I walked those black halls in a thin shawl and felt nothing but the warm place in my hand where the blue light had been. I didn't think it strange. I thought I was lucky. I would learn, soon enough, exactly how wrong a word that was. The morning after, in the corridor, Lord Castor found me. He was the king's cousin next in line for the ice, if Eirik died with no heir, and he was everything the king was not. Warm, smiling, easy, he filled a room the way warm water fills a cup. And it took me far too long to learn that warm water can drown you just the same as cold. You're the little healer, he said, falling into step beside me like an old friend. The whole hold's talking. They say the king sleeps now. They say his wound's gone quiet for the first time in years. I clean it, my lord. That's all. Modest, he smiled wider. Tell me when you tend my poor cousin, does the great Alpha King ever speak of an heir? Of marrying again? A man tells his secrets to gentle hands. He tells me nothing, my lord. I tend the wound and I go. Good girl. He stopped me with a touch to my elbow, light as anything, and his voice never lost its warmth. Keep it that way. A barren king is a sad thing, Runa. The whole kingdom grieves for him. His eyes moved over my face, slow, counting something. But a barren king, with a clever maid, getting ideas now, that's a dangerous thing. For the maid. Stairs are slick this time of year. People in a hurry fall. He patted my cheek the way you'd pat a child, and he walked on, whistling. I told myself it was nothing. A great lord's idle cruelty. I was very good, in those days, at telling myself things. Winter deepened, and somewhere in it, without my ever deciding to, I fell. It happened the way real things happen, not all at once, but in 100 small ones. Here are the ones I kept. The night he laughed for the first time. I'd come in shaking snow off my shawl, and I tripped on the edge of his great wolf pelt rug and went down on one knee with the basin, and the water sloshed, and I swore. A low gutter word a serving girl should never say in a king's chamber, and froze in horror with my hand over my mouth. For a second, the room was silent. Then Eirik laughed. A real one. It started low and broke open out of him like something that had been locked up too long, and his whole hard face changed with it. Younger, warmer, the gray eyes crinkling at the corners. Say it again, he said. Your Grace. No, the word. I haven't heard a true word in this hall in a year. Everyone in this court speaks to me like I'm already dead. He was still smiling. You speak to me like I'm a man who made you spill a bucket. You did make me spill a bucket. I know. Celine, help me, it's the best thing that's happened to me all winter. I laughed too then. I couldn't help it. And he watched me laugh with a look on his face I didn't have a word for yet, and the firelight moved on both of us, and the cold outside might as well have been on the other side of the world. The night he warmed my hands. There was a hard freeze and my fingers had gone stiff and clumsy on the dressing, and I fumbled the knot twice. "Stop," he said. "Your hands are shaking." "They're cold, Your Grace. They'll settle." "Give them here." "Your Grace." Runa. It was the first time he'd used my name. Just my name, low, in that dark room, and it did something to me I felt all the way to my feet. "Give me your hands." I gave him my hands. He took them both in his, and his were enormous, scarred, hot as a banked fire, and he folded them up inside his and held them there against his chest, over the slow beat of his heart, and he didn't say anything at all. He just held my cold hands until they were warm. A king. Warming a serving girl's hands in the dark like they were worth the keeping. "You're always cold," he said finally, quiet. "Everyone in this hold is cold. Why are your hands the only ones that warm the moment I touch them?" I didn't have an answer. I had only the feel of his heart under my knuckles and the warm light starting, very faint, in my palms. And I knew then, with a kind of terror, exactly how far I had already fallen. The night he told me the truth about himself. He'd had wine. Not much. Enough. "You want to know the worst of it?" he said, looking at the fire and not at me. "It isn't the throne. Let Castor have the cursed throne. It's what I wanted to be a father. That's the part I can't say to any of them." His jaw worked. A great alpha king is supposed to want power, sons to hold the line. I wanted... He stopped, and his voice went very low and very young. I wanted small hands in mine. I wanted to teach someone to walk out onto the ice and not be afraid of it. And the moon took that and laughed, and now I sit here being measured for my coffin by my own cousin. He finally looked at me. "There. Now you know the king's softest place. You could ruin me with it." "I would never," I said, and I meant it with my whole chest. "I know," he said, and the way he said it, as he'd already decided to trust me, like it was the easiest decision he'd made in years, undid the last of me. And the night it tipped. His wound was nearly closed by then. The blue light came up steady and clean under my hands, and the angry red was almost gone, and I had no real reason to keep coming, and we both knew it. And I came anyway. I finished the dressing. I should have stood. I didn't. He was close. We were always close now. The careful distance of those first weeks long gone. And I could feel the heat coming off him in the cold room, feel it on my cheek and my throat. And I was so aware of his body beside mine that I forgot how to breathe normally. His hand came up and caught mine. Not to move it to the wound, just to hold it. "Don't stop coming," he said. "When it heals, don't stop. There'll be no wound left to tend, Your Grace." "I'm not talking about the wound." His thumb moved, slow, over the back of my hand, and my whole body lit as the scar did. "Look at me and tell me I'm the only one who feels this. Tell me I'm an old fool and I'll never say it again." I looked at him. The fire was low. His gray eyes weren't stone anymore. They were open and afraid, and waiting on me like I was the one who held the power in that room. And maybe, for the first time in my life, I did. "You're not the only one," I whispered. He brought his other hand up to my face, slow, giving me every chance to pull away. And when I didn't, he kissed me. It was not a king taking a serving girl. It was a man who'd been cold for 4 years, finding a fire. Careful, like he was afraid it wasn't real. I felt the warmth pour up out of my hands and into both of us, and the cold and the court and the whole cracking kingdom went away, and there was only this. His mouth, and his breath, and his big hand trembling against my jaw, and my own heart saying a thing it had never once been allowed to say. I should have been afraid. I wasn't. That was the most frightening part of all. After that night, The world had warmth in it. For a little while. And then, 6 weeks later, I sat on the edge of my narrow cot in the gray before dawn and counted the days. Twice, then a third time. Slow, the way you'd handle something that might break if you weren't gentle. The number did not change. I put my hand flat against my stomach, and the whole impossible truth pressed up under it like the blue light pressing up under his scar. I was carrying a child. His child. The child of a king the entire kingdom swore could never father one. And I understood, all at once and completely, exactly what that meant for a woman like me. Because there was no kind story to tell about it. If I was carrying, then either their barren king was not barren after all, which made me the nameless serving girl who'd proven it in his bed, raised above alpha-born daughters, a target for every soul in the court who'd been counting on that empty cradle, or I'd lain with some other man and tried to pass a bastard off as a king's heir. There was no third story, and both of them ended with me out on the ice. I went to Branna. I found her grinding herbs in the gray light, and I told her in 3 words. I'm with child. The pestle stopped. She went the color of old ash. Celine, have mercy. Girl, do you know what you've done? I know what they'll say I've done. No. She crossed the room fast and took both my wrists, and her old eyes were wet and fierce and frightened all at once. You don't know the half of it, and I can't tell you the half of it yet, not here, not where the walls listen. But you hear me now. Her grip tightened. You tell no one, not the king, not your own shadow. The day this court learns you're carrying is the day someone in it decides you won't carry long. Do you understand me? Branna, you're frightening me. Good, she said. Be frightened. Frightened women live longer in this hold. She let go of my wrists and pressed her hand, just for a second, to my stomach, and her face did something terrible and tender. Oh, child, she breathed. Of all the women in Frostmere. It had to be you. What does that mean? Not here. She turned back to her herbs, but her hands were shaking now. Not yet. Go, act like nothing's changed. And whatever you feel for that man up there in the dark, keep it off your face. That was the first time anyone said it out loud, that the danger wasn't shame. The danger was that the child was already wanted dead, by someone who hadn't even seen it yet. I told Eirik in the end. I couldn't not. He scented the change in me before I'd said a word. Alphas know these things. The blood tells them, and he went very still. And then he looked at me with a question in his face so raw, I had to look away. Runa, he said. Is it yes? He went down. A king, on his knees on the cold stone, in front of me. He pressed his forehead against my stomach and wrapped his arms around the backs of my legs and held on like a man in deep water holding a rope. For a long time, he didn't make a single sound. When he finally looked up, 4 years of grief had washed clean off his face and left something underneath it I'd never seen, something young and broken open and shining. Say it again, he said. I need to hear it again. I'm carrying your child. Mine. His voice cracked on the word. Say it's mine. It's yours, Eirik. There's never been anyone but you. I had stopped asking the moon for anything, he said into my dress. 4 years. I stopped praying. I stopped wanting, because wanting only ever cost me. His arms tightened, and she sent me you anyway. Quiet, in the dark, with cold hands, she sent me you. For 3 weeks I let myself be happy. I knew better. I'd been warned. I knew the way you know a storm is coming by the color of the lake, and I did it anyway. Because some happiness is worth the price of it, and 3 weeks of his is the warmest I have ever been in my life. He moved me out of the cold servant's wing and into the warm rooms near his own. He told the court I was his healer now, kept close for his wound, and dared a single one of them to question it. He gave me a fur, a great silver wolf pelt, soft as a thought, and put it around my shoulders himself. You'll never be cold in my hold again, he said. Not while I draw breath. But there is a price for being moved into the light. In the cold servant's wing, No one had ever once looked at me. Now the whole hold did, and one man most of all. I felt it first as a prickle on the back of my neck, in the great hall, the particular weight of being watched. When I turned, it was always Castor, smiling, lifting his cup to me like a doting uncle while his eyes did that slow counting they always did, like he was adding the weeks up on my body. He never said a wrong word. He didn't need to. The smile said it for him. I see you, little healer. I see exactly how far along you are. And Branna did not share my happiness. She caught me one morning folding linens I had no reason left to fold, and her hand closed hard around my wrist. You're glowing, she said, and she did not mean it kindly. Stop it. A happy woman gets careless. She takes the icy stair without the rail. She eats what's handed her without looking at the hand. She stops watching the doors. Her old eyes flicked once toward the hall where Castor sat. The happier you let yourself look, girl, the easier you are to put under the ice. Be cold. Be small. Be the hands a little longer for the babe, if you won't do it for yourself. I told her I would. I meant it. But it is a hard thing to make yourself small again after a king has spent 3 weeks teaching you that you are worth the keeping. So I kept being happy. And across the hall, every day Castor kept counting. At night he'd sit me down by the high fire and put both his hands flat on the small swell that wasn't even there yet, and talk in a low voice about the child like it was already running the halls. A boy, I think, he said one night, kissing my knuckles one by one, slow, like each one was its own small vow. Stubborn, like his mother. He'll spill every bucket in Frostmere. A girl, I said, and she'll have your terrible gray eyes. My eyes aren't terrible. They terrified me half to death the first night. He laughed and pulled me back against his chest and pressed his mouth to the top of my head. Good, he murmured into my hair. I like that I terrified you. It means you noticed me. No one's looked at me as a man in years. They look at a throne with a face on it. His arms came around me, warm, sure. You looked at me like I was a man who made you spill a bucket. Do you have any idea what that did to me? I have some idea, I said. You warmed my hands. I'll warm your hands every night for the rest of my life, he said. That's a promise, not a kindness. He turned me in his arms, so I had to look up at him. When the babe comes, I'll put my mark on you in front of the whole court. You'll be my Luna. There'll be nothing left for them to call you but mine. They'll call me a liar first, I said quietly. You know they will. Let them. His gray eyes had gone fierce and certain. Let every one of them say it to my face. I'll stand between you and the whole cold kingdom, Runa. There is nothing in this world I am afraid of anymore. She gave you to me. Let them try and take you back. I believed him. That was my mistake. Not loving him. Loving him was the one right thing I ever did. My mistake was believing the court would let him keep his word. Lord Castor knew before we ever announced it. Of course he did. Men like Castor always know. A pregnant maid changes the arithmetic of a throne, and Castor had been doing that arithmetic for 4 years. His road to the ice had been so simple: wait for the heirless king to die, step over the body, take the crown. A child erased that road overnight. He didn't rage. That was the part that froze the blood in me. He smiled wider. He began to visit the warm rooms, bringing me sweet things, winter pears, honeyed nuts, the soft white bread the kitchens kept for the high table, asking after me, so gently, every single day. And how is our little mother today? He'd say, settling into the chair across from me like a doting uncle. Is the babe strong? Kicking yet? No, too soon for that, of course. How far along now? Remind me. I do like to keep count. You're kind to ask, my lord. I'm a sentimental man. He'd smile and reach over and pat my hand. You must be so careful, Runa, truly. The stairs in the East Wing are wicked this time of year, all that ice. And a woman in your condition, top-heavy, rushing about. His eyes never left mine. It would break my cousin's heart to lose another child. It would break mine. Every day. Always how far along. Always the stairs. A man checking a calendar he meant to tear a page out of. I told Eirik. He went still in that way he had, the storm-coming stillness, and his hand closed slow around the arm of his chair until the wood creaked. He told me, long after, when it was safe to say such things in the dark, what he'd been thinking those days. I'll give it to you straight. The way he gave it to me, I knew that smile, he said. I'd worn it myself, in the war, choosing which man to cut down first and keeping my face kind while I chose. My cousin wasn't warning you about the stairs. He was measuring you for them. And I knew it, Runa. I knew it in my gut. His voice had gone rough. And still, Celine, forgive me, some fool part of me thought a child was a gift the world would simply let me keep. I'd never once been allowed to keep anything good. I should have known better. I should have hidden you that very night. Instead, I let myself be happy. Same as you, and it nearly cost me everything that has ever mattered. But that was all later. In the moment, he only said, I'll deal with Castor. He never got the chance. Castor moved first. It was 3 nights later. Castor called the full court to the great hall on some thin excuse of pack business, and when they were all gathered, every lord and lady of Frostmere under the cold torches, he stood up with his hand pressed over his heart and grief all over his handsome face. My king, he said, and he pitched it loud enough for the very back of the hall. Forgive me, but I love you too well to stay silent, while the whole hold whispers behind your back. So let me be the one with the courage to say it to your face. He turned, slow, so the whole court could follow his eyes, and his eyes landed on me. Your healer is with child. The hall went dead silent. And we all know, Castor went on, soft now, terrible. Celine, rest your poor murdered line, that you, my king, cannot be the father. 100 faces turned to me at once. I felt them like cold water. And Eirik, my Eirik, who had kissed my knuckles one by one and sworn there was nothing left in the world he feared, turned slowly in his great chair and looked at me. For one heartbeat, he looked at me like I was a stranger. It was only a heartbeat. But a heartbeat is enough to break a thing that can't be mended in a year. I watched it move across his face. The old grief. The old, bone-deep certainty that the world had taken his children once and would never, ever let him keep one. 4 years of being told he was barren is not a stone you lift in a single second, not even for love. Not even with the woman you love standing in front of you with her hand on your child. Runa, low, careful, his voice did not sound like his own. Tell me he's lying. He's lying, Eirik. Then how he stopped. His jaw locked. Because the rest of the question was the one thing he couldn't say in front of his court. The one thing every soul in that hall was already thinking. The one thing that had been carved into him for 4 years. How, when I am what I am? And in the half-second of his silence, that one terrible held breath Castor struck. Guards, he said it gently, almost sadly, like a man doing a hard duty. Take her. For the safety of the bloodline. We'll do it the old way, let the ice decide what she is. It never lies. He looked at Eirik, and there was a glint of triumph buried deep in all that false grief. Unless my king objects? The hands closed on my arms. Eirik stood. His chair scraped back, and he hesitated. 1 second. Half of one. A man torn clean down the middle between 4 years of grief and 1 season of hope, frozen at the exact moment I needed him to move. That half second is the hinge the whole story turns on. He has spent every day since paying for it. But in that moment it was simply the worst thing that had ever happened to me, worse than the cold, worse than the years of being looked through. The one person who had ever truly seen me, not moving, while they dragged me toward the dark. They hauled me out of the hall and down through the water gate and out onto the frozen lake, under a full white moon that turned all the ice to bone. The cold came down on every man around me. I saw it bite their faces. saw their breath tear out in clouds, and it did not touch me. Not even now. Not even here. I walked to what was meant to be my death, wrapped in a warmth I couldn't explain, with my hand over the child they meant to drown, and I had never in my life felt so completely alone. Eirik, I called back once, toward the lit doorway where he still stood, unmoving, a black shape against the fire. He didn't follow. The great doors closed. And out there, in the dark of the ice, with the post and the rope already waiting, a bent old woman caught up to me at a stumbling run, out of breath, a lantern swinging in her fist and 4 years of buried truth on her lips. Branna reached me before the guards could chain me to the post. She shoved between us with a strength I didn't know that small old body held. A moment, she barked at them. You'll give a condemned woman a moment with the midwife, or you'll answer to the goddess for it. And something in the old voice made even Castor's men step back a pace. She gripped my arms and put her mouth close to my ear. Listen to me, she said, fast and low and shaking. Your king is not barren. He never was. Do you hear me? Never, the world tilted. What? I birthed in this hold for 40 years, girl. I was there the night his Luna lost her child. And that babe was healthy, Runa, strong, a son. I held him. Her old eyes filled. He did not die on his own. There was a mark on him, burned into the skin over his little heart. 3 silver lines in a broken circle. Witch work. A curse brand, paid for in silver. A curse the same mark, she hissed, that I found on the king's wound 4 years ago when they let me dress it the once. The same one. Don't you see it yet? The assassin's blade didn't take his strength to make sons. The blade was only the door. The curse rode in on it. As long as that wound burned, no child of his blood could live to draw breath. Someone paid a witch to end the line of Frostmere root and branch, father and son both. I couldn't breathe. My hand had gone to my stomach without my telling it to. Then how? I whispered. How is this child because the curse is breaking? Branna pulled back just enough to look at my face, and what was in her own face was wonder, terrible and bright. Because of you, child, I've watched you for months and told myself I was a foolish old woman. But it's true. The cold doesn't touch you. I've seen you walk the death cold halls in a shawl. His wound goes quiet under your hands when it's torn 3 healers apart. You ease what cannot be eased. Her voice dropped to almost nothing. There is only one blood in all the world that does those things. The Moonborn. The fated true mate, born under the silver moon, whose bond the goddess herself ties with her own hands, and whose touch unmakes any curse laid against the one she's bound to. The blue light. The moon-timed pain. The cold that had spared me my whole life. Not luck. Not chance. Not a gift the world handed me by accident. Me. It had always been me. I was the cure. The child wasn't proof of my betrayal. The child was proof the curse had finally lost. And Castor, I said, and my voice came out of me hard and flat and strange. Castor paid for it. Castor paid for all of it. Branna's voice broke clean in 2. The first babe. The wound. 4 years of his cousin's grief. He's been waiting on that empty cradle since the night he murdered it. And now she pressed something into my hand. A strip of old cloth. Brown stiff with 4-year blood. A faint blue mark still glowing through the stain. Now you understand why he counts your days. A barren king he could outwait forever. A moonborn mate carrying the true heir of Frostmere. Her wet eyes burned into mine. You undo him, girl. You undo the whole of it, just by drawing breath. He has to put you under that ice tonight. You're the one thing in the world that can prove what he did. I looked at the post. I looked at the rope. I looked at the great white moon hanging over the hold where the man I loved still stood frozen in a lit doorway. And I stopped being afraid. I stopped running. Then I won't make it easy for him, I said, and I closed my fist around the bloody cloth. Branna, will you swear to what you just told me? In front of all of them? The old woman straightened her bent back as far as it would go. I've waited 4 years to swear to it, she said. Lead on. I didn't go to the post. I turned around, and I walked back toward the hold, into the lantern light, with the bloody cloth held up high over my head for the whole court to see. Alpha King Heir. I shouted, and my voice carried across that frozen lake like it belonged to a braver woman than I had ever been. Before you let them drown your heir, come and look at what your cousin paid to bury your sons. The court spilled out of the hall onto the ice, a confusion of torches and breath and shocked faces, and through the middle of them came Heir, fast, his face white, like a man waking out of a nightmare into a worse one. I didn't wait for him to reach me. I threw the cloth down at Lord Castor's polished boots. The brand on the king's dead son, I said loud, so every soul on that ice could hear it. 3 silver lines and a broken circle. Branna held that child. She'll swear to it before the goddess and the whole court. And it is the same mark, the very same that has burned in your king's side for 4 years. I lifted my chin. You didn't wait for the line of Frostmere to die, my lord. You killed it. A witch and a fistful of silver. And you've been counting my days like a man counting down to a hanging, because I am the one thing left alive that can prove it. Castor laughed. But it came out thin this time, and high, and wrong. A serving girl's story, he said, turning to the court, spreading his hands. Grief has driven the poor creature mad. A pregnant liar will say anything to save her own neck, then let the wound answer, I said. And I turned away from him, and I crossed the ice to Heir, and in front of his entire court I laid my hand flat against his side, over the 4-year scar, the way I had 100 times in the dark. It blazed. The blue light tore up out of the wound so bright that the whole court cried out and fell back, lighting our faces and the ice and the falling snow electric blue, and then, for the first time in 4 years, with the whole of Frostmere watching, the light went out. The curse let go, and under my palm, clean and final, the scar closed. I lifted my hand away. Where 4 years of weeping wound had been, there was only smooth, whole skin. Silence, the kind you could fall into. A wound like that, I said, into all that silence, does not heal under a liar's hand. Heir looked down at his own healed side. He touched it once, with 2 fingers, like he couldn't believe it. Then he looked up at his cousin, and the warmth I knew was gone from his face entirely, and what was left was the Alpha King the kingdoms feared. Take him, he said. Quiet, which was so much worse than a roar. Lord Castor of Frostmere. To the silver mines. Let my cousin spend the rest of his life counting days of his own. Castor screamed. They took him anyway. The court did not lift one hand to save him. And then, on the frozen lake, in front of every lord and lady who had watched them drag me out to die, the Alpha King of Frostmere went down on his knees before a serving girl, and he groveled. I doubted you, he said. His voice shook. He didn't try to hide it. For one breath, on the worst night of your life, when all you needed in this world was for me to stand between you and them, I stood still. I let 4 years of grief weigh more than the woman carrying my child. That was mine, Runa. The failing was mine, not yours. And I will carry it every day I have left. Heir, I'm not finished. He bowed his head. I'll give it up. The thing that kept me safe all these years, the certainty that nothing good was ever coming to me, so I'd never have to lose it again. I'm done with it. I'll stand in front of every soul on this ice and name you what you are. But I won't reach for you. Not this time. Not after what I let them do to you tonight. He went utterly still. He kept his hands at his sides. He did not move toward me 1 inch. Stay, and you're my Luna, my mate, the mother of my heir, and I will spend my life making sure you're never cold or doubted again. Walk away and I won't follow you. I won't. It's your choice, Runa. It was always supposed to be your choice. I'm only sorry it took me until tonight to give it to you. The whole court was watching. The wind moved over the ice. The great moon looked down. And I looked at this man on his knees in the snow, the cold king, who'd warmed my hands in the dark, who'd laughed at a spilled bucket, who'd told me his softest secret and trusted me not to ruin him, and I crossed the last of the ice between us, and I took his face in both my cold hands and lifted it up to mine. "You terrible-eyed, brooding fool," I said, and I was crying and smiling both at once. "I chose you the first night you warmed my hands. Get up off the ice. Your daughter doesn't want a king who kneels." He came up and took me into his arms like a man coming home, and he held me so hard I felt his heart going against mine, and I chose him. There, in front of all of them. I chose him. He pressed his forehead to mine and held it there, both his big hands flat and warm against the small swell of our child, his whole body between me and the cold and the court and the whole hard world. "You were never the hands," he said low, "just for me. Do you know that's what I called you, even in my own heart? A pair of hands. Useful, quiet, easily sent away when she'd served her turn." His thumbs moved over my wet cheeks. "I made you small so I could survive how much I wanted you. And tonight I nearly let them throw you out onto the ice because of it. Never again, Runa. As long as I breathe, you will never again be a woman this court can look through." And that was the wound, the one I'd carried since the day I came to Frostmere with no name worth saying. The belief, bone deep, that I was a useful pair of hands the world could lose and never once miss. He took it from me in a single breath. And, goddess help me, I believed him. And then, the strangest thing. The whole court, the same lords and ladies who'd watched me dragged to the ice not an hour before, took a knee. Not for Castor's blood, for the Moonborn maid and the cursed king whose 4-year wound she'd healed in front of their eyes. We went inside, out of the cold, into the warm rooms that were ours now. He locked the great door behind us. The fire was high in gold. He sat me down in the good chair, and then this enormous man, this King Kingdoms, feared he knelt one more time. Happily, this time. He pressed his ear to the small curve of my belly, gentle as anything, like he could already hear the heartbeat inside. "A son," he murmured. "I'm sure of it." "A girl," I said, and I ran my warm fingers through his dark hair. "Stubborn, she'll heal things she shouldn't be able to heal, and the cold will never once touch her." He looked up at me, and the gray eyes that had terrified me half to death the first night were crinkled at the corners, young and warm and full. "Then, Celine, help us all," he said. "2 of you, in one hold." He caught my hand and pressed his mouth to the palm, the same palm that had carried the blue light, that had broken his curse, and held it there. "Marry me at the next full moon, out on the ice where you saved us both. Let the whole kingdom watch me put my mark on you." "Yes," I said. "Yes? Yes, you brooding fool. Now warm my hands. You made a promise." He laughed and folded both my cold hands up inside his against his heart, and the warm light started, soft and steady, between his palms and mine. "There," he said. "Warm. Anything else, my Luna?" "Don't my Luna me in that voice. You sound like you're addressing the War Council." "I am addressing my War Council. She has cold hands and a great many opinions, and she does not salute." I pinched him. He didn't even pretend it hurt. "A boy," he said again, smug, settling back like the matter was already closed. "A great roaring boy who'll spill every bucket in the hold. A girl. With your terrible gray eyes, and one day she'll terrify some poor lord half to death across a hall, and you will weep. Kings do not weep. You wept twice tonight." On the ice. I was standing right there. He opened his mouth. Shut it again. "That," he said, with enormous dignity, "was the wind. The wind. It is very cold out on the lake, Runa. This is widely known." I laughed so hard I had to hold my own belly, and he watched me do it with that look again, the one I finally had a word for now, and then he got up and fetched a third fur I absolutely did not need, and tucked it around me anyway, fussing. This enormous man who'd sent grown alphas running, fretting over whether my feet were warm enough. "Eirik, I have 3 furs and a fire the size of a cart. You told me you were always cold." I'm not cold now. You fix that. Sit down before you wear a track in your own floor. He sat. He took my feet into his lap, because of course he did. When the babe comes, he said, I'm to be in the room. I don't care a whit what Branna says about men in birthing chambers. Branna will throw you out by your royal ear. I'd like to see the old crow try. I would also very much like to see that. I admitted. Let's wager on it. Loser of the boy or girl bet is the one who has to tell Branna he's coming in. He went still. What are the full stakes? If it's a girl, which it is, you spend her first whole moon turn doing exactly as she screams. No beta. No nurse. You, the Alpha King of Frostmere, on the floor at 3 a.m, making faces at a baby. And if, by some miracle of Selene, it is a boy? It isn't. Runa, fine, if it's a boy, I'll call you my king in that low voice for a whole week. And mean it. Done, that is the easiest wager I have ever made. Oh, you've already lost it, I said, and patted his cheek the way Castor once patted mine, except mine was a promise and not a threat. You just don't know it yet. He pulled me back against his chest, still laughing the easy laugh now, the one that lived close to the top of him these days, and I felt it rumble all the way through me. I had come to Frostmere with 2 skills and no name worth saying. I left that winter with both my hands warm in a king's, a daughter on the way. He still insists it's a son. He is still wrong. A name the whole court would one day kneel to, and, at the very last, the one thing I had never once felt in the whole cold length of my life. I finally understood what safe felt like. And safe, it turns out, laughs, loudly, at 3 a.m. I had not known that. No one ever told me. We were happy. Let me say that plainly, and leave it standing, because so many stories like mine never get to. We married on the ice under the full moon, and he put his mark on me in front of all of Frostmere. And in the spring our daughter came stubborn, gray-eyed, screaming down the walls, and the cold never once touched her, just as I'd said. Eirik paid his wager with great dignity and a truly remarkable number of faces. To this day he swears the gray eyes are striking, not terrible, and to this day I remind him that the first time he turned them on me I nearly drowned in a wash basin. We argue about it most nights. It is, I think, my favorite argument in the world. But the silver mark she was born, with the small shining curve over her heart that meant Moonborn, the bloodline that had not walked the Silver Peak Kingdom in 300 years, did not stay a secret for long. Marks like that never do. A month after her first cry, a black banner crossed the frozen lake toward our gates. The High King of Silver Peak, who had not risen from his throne in the capital in longer than I'd been alive, was sending for my daughter. Next time, I'll tell you what a grandfather of kings wanted with a healer's child, and exactly how close I came to burning Frostmere to the ground to keep her out of his hands. Subscribe and meet her before they come to take her.